خب تا این مانیتور بزرگ آماده بشه من دو تا توضیح بدم. این خب سخنرانی بنده یکم تفاوت داره با سخنرانی قبلی. نخست یه پاورپوینت یا پرزنتیشنی داریم، امیدواریم در پرده ظاهر بشه. و دوم اینه که چون متنی که قراره در موردش صحبت کنم برگرفته از تز دکترام هست، متن در انگلیسی بود و من راستش به خاطر عدم وقت مناسب برای برگردوندن این متن به فارسی مجبور شدم این متن رو در انگلیسی آماده کنم. اما حتما در جلسه پرسش و پاسخ خوشحال میشم به توضیحات و ایرادات در فارسی جواب. ادامه میشه. بله. حالا بهترم از فکرم این چهار رو خاموش کنیم. بله. خب گفتیم یه تفاوتایی هست دیگه با سخنرانی قبلی. نخستیم که خب بحث ما در مورد قانون اساسی است و این جلد نشریه امید ایران رو به دست آوردیم و گذاشتیم. I'm going to quickly go through my speech in English. The purpose of the speech is to analyze the events that happened in Iran between January 1979 and August 1979, when the first steps towards the completion of the first constitution of the Islamic Republic period were on the way. And the purpose is to analyze the role of the clergy in this process and the powers which were given to the clergy in the several texts that came out in this period, and assess what the reactions of the clergy were to these texts. There's a conventional reading of this period, and you find it in a lot of scholarship, academic texts, in a lot of memoirs by people who were active in the constitution writing process at the time, and that is that at some point there was a secular text. The text was given to Ayatollah Khomeini. Ayatollah Khomeini gave a positive view to it and said that it should be put straight to a referendum for the people to approve. That didn't happen, and then an assembly called the Majlis al-Khobregan came into being. This Majlis al-Khobregan imposed the Velayat al-Faqih doctrine on top of the existing text, and finally we had a final version which was a clerical text with this primacy of the Velayat al-Faqih. Well, this paper is going to assess this thesis and see how correct it is. So what happened after Bisodoy Bahman, after February 11? The Shah's regime falls, and this debate starts on the form and function of the future state. And Ayatollah Khomeini, during his long exile, in Najaf and Paris, he had never written a constitution himself. He had never given a clear idea on what the institutions of the post-monarchist state should be, and what sort of republic Iran should be. Should Iran be a presidential republic, a republic in which the prime minister should run affairs, whether the clergy would have any role in the state, whether the Wali Faqih should be a separate institution? He didn't really give a clear indication on this, not even in his book, Hukumat-e-Islami. But what happened, as I said, was that the constitution, eventually in November 79, Iran had a constitution. So the timeline of this paper is, on the 1st of February, Ayatollah Khomeini returns to Iran, and in the flight between Tehran and Paris, according to a recent documentary, Sadegh Tabatabai had a copy of the new constitution, which was already being produced in Paris. In March of 1979, what will be known in this paper as the Esfand text gets published. It doesn't get published. It gets handed over to Ayatollah Khomeini in Qom. Ayatollah Khomeini makes some comments on some of the articles, and this will be the only instance in which Ayatollah Khomeini actually makes comments on articles of any constitution before the final one. In the spring of 1979, in the month of Khordad, there is a text which is released by the newspapers, which is called the final text of the Dawlat-e-Muwaggat, Mehdi Bazagan's government. This text gets subject to a lot of discussion, to a lot of debate. in June and August. Then in July, there is the elections for the Majlis Khobregan. There's a strong showing by figures either allied to Khomeini or perceived to be associated to him. Big defeat for the secular parties, the Tudeh, the Mujahideen Khalq, and incidentally, this is the most pluralist election of the last 32 years. It's the only election in which nearly all the political parties who were active in Iran at the time participate, and it gives us the only statistics we have on, for example, the electoral popularity of Masoud Rajavi, of all people. On the 19th of August, the anniversary of the coup d'etat against Mohammad Mossadegh, the Assembly of Experts starts working, and in due process creates the Bilat Faghi Constitution. So what were the initial stages? In late 1978 in Paris, Ayatollah Khomeini persuades Bazagan to work towards the creation of a provisional revolutionary government, the Dawlat al-Muwaggat, and orders the creation of the Revolutionary Council or Shura Inqilab. There were also discussions over the constitution, some preliminary discussions. And the issue was, according to what Nasser Minachi said later, was that the Shah's regime was crumbling and somebody had to come up with a constitution in the case in which the Shah would simply hand over the keys of the country to the revolutionaries. And according to Hassan Habibi, who later, of course, became vice president in the Rafsanjani and Khatami eras, Khomeini assigned him the task of writing the first constitution. And Habibi was a French sociologist by training, and he created a constitution which was very modeled upon the constitution of the Gaullist French Fifth Republic, which was then in place in France, and it had as its centerpiece a strong presidential institution. And Abul Hassan Bani Sad, who was obviously involved in all this because he was in the inner circle of Khomeini, Nof el-Chateau, he eventually would say that this draft by Habibi was a completely de Gaullist one, but our problem was that we had no de Gaulle in Iran. When this group flies back to Iran in Bahman, there is more discussion. Before this group goes back to Tehran in Bahman, there is Khomeini tells Habibi to travel to Tehran and establish contact with a group of jurists who were in Tehran and proceed and carry on the work with them. This group was formed by the following group of people, mainly Nasser Katuzian, Abdul Karim Laiji, Fatullah Bani Sad, Nasser Minachi, and Mohammad Jafari Langaroudi. They had the order to revise Habibi's text and bring it in tune with the revolution and Islamic ideas of the time. And what happened was that in Esfand, we have the first complete text of the constitution of the revolutionary era, and it's called the Nokhostin Pisherise Rasmi Qanun Asasi. Obviously, it's a very long text, it's 160 articles, and we won't go into it in depth. We will just focus on a couple of articles of it which are related to the powers of the clergy. As we see, Ayandegan at that time on the Noel Svand, it had a title that the Pisherise Qanun Asasi was handed over to Khomeini. The centerpiece of this article, of this constitution, was again Article 75, which defined the president, no mention of Wilayat Faghi, as the highest authority of the land, as the most powerful state institution. There were other articles which mandated the power of the shuras and stated that Hakimiyat Milli was, or national sovereignty, was exclusively at the hands of the people, no other group. So where was the clergy in this text? Well, there was an entire chapter devoted to a new institution called the Shura Negahban, the Guardian Council. And according to this constitution, according to this chapter, Article 151 defined the Guardian Council as having the duty of protecting constitutions from likely infringements brought to the constitution itself by Parliament. So there was already this idea that Parliament would break the essence of the constitution even before it was formed. The Guardian Council was supposed to be composed by 15 members, 5 mujtahids chosen by the Marja of Qom, 5 members chosen by the judiciary, and 5 others chosen by Parliament. Article 152 stipulated that the Guardian Council was not a permanent institution like we see it today. It was to be called into action by either the president, the Marja, or the head of the judiciary. And